So welcome to the United Imaging Healthcare Symposium. While Dr. Osborne is going to walk down, he's just right up the escalator. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Guillaume Grousset. I head the CT business for United Imaging here in the US. And for those of you who do not know United Imaging, we're a global manufacturer of medical imaging equipment with, to date, over 140 different products, 40 of which are FDA cleared for sale in the US. We mostly commercialize in the US CTs, MRs, PET CTs, and digital radiology systems. So thank you all for being here this afternoon. Our speaker today is going to be Dr. Osborne, who I'm just going to give you a very brief bio. Obtained his MD from Jefferson Medical School, college, and his PhD in cardiovascular physiology from Thomas Jefferson University. After graduation, he continued on to Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospitals, is that correct? Here in Boston, so it's kind of coming back home, so to speak. Dr. Osborne has been recognized as a fellow of ACC and also of the National Lipid Association. His clinical training focused mostly on non-invasive techniques, and his clinical interests include many things, a lot of them, so I just trimmed down because there were too many. But preventive cardiology, hypertension, congestive heart failure, and cardiovascular genetics. Dr. Osborne is the founder and director of State-of-the-Art Cardiology in Dallas, Texas, and he's also the director of cardiovascular imaging at the Carleton Regional Medical Center, where the first uCT Atlas 16 cm from United Imaging was installed in the US. So without further ado, Dr. Osborne.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome everybody, and wonderful to be able to share our lunch with us today as we go through some of the excitement I'm going to hopefully share with you, and hopefully you'll feel some of my passion about some of this new equipment. So I'm going to give you sort of our background, a little bit of my background, a little bit of our background, how the decision was made, and then of course we'll end up with a nice review of some of the beautiful pictures that this machine makes as well. So I like to call this from cardiac imaging to cardiovascular vision. I am the director of cardiovascular imaging at the Carleton Regional Medical Center, and I've been working with them for the last few years as a consultant in order to identify what we felt was the premium cardiac CT machine. So certainly during the course of this weekend, we've had quite, as usual, a peek into the future, lots of exciting things happening in cardiac CT, as there always is. I'm particularly taken by total whole heart plaque quantification and all of those tools. We've certainly seen this mature, but also at the same time, there's considerable innovation, both in hardware as well as software too. And obviously, we're mostly going to be talking about hardware as well. As a worldview, I have to admit that I view cardiac CT, and this is how I share it with patients, as the cardiac colonoscopy, right? That kind of simple idea that, we're going to use this to find out, do you have polyps, do you have cancer? And I also then follow that concept up, that cardiac colonoscopy concept up with, if I'm competing against, if you will, screening for colon cancer with my GI colleagues, I like to say, you also have to appreciate that we in the world of cardiology, of atherosclerosis treatments, really have a major advantage over our GI colleagues because for a couple reasons. One is that cardiovascular disease, strokes and heart attacks combined together, atherosclerotic disease, still kills only 40% of us. And to make that matter worse, in about half of men and 2/3 of women, the first symptom of cardiovascular disease is you die. If you compare that to something like colon cancer, about 5% of people in the US will get colon cancer, which again should be 0, and 2 to 3% will die from it. So if you look at the burden of mortality and morbidity, obviously cardiovascular disease is dramatically higher than colon cancer. And yet we have an incredible system to initiate colon cancer screening was 50, now 45, probably be lowered even further than that as well. So I always like to, when we do cardiovascular CT, I always like to talk about to the patient, it's the cardiac colonoscopy, find out what's going on. And also, just a little background so you understand my worldview again. I had started actually doing CT angiography. Well, actually, I have to correct that. EBCT angiography back about 2001. Went out to California, spent a few days with Matt Budoff. He was injecting contrast when they were doing their EBCs. He called it EBAs, electron beam angiography. And we had just bought a friend of mine just bought a new $2 million machine back in those days, EBCT machine. And so we spent a few days with Matt Budoff, go, okay, got it, and then came back. And over the next few years, from roughly 2001 to 2005, did several hundred EBAs, terrible hardware, terrible software, but if you could read EBAs, you could read anything. So in 2005, when we got our first 64-slice CT, reading those images was a walk in the park. It was really no issue at all. But I had really caught that bug of cardiovascular CT well over 20 years ago. And so if we again look at this now, talking about the cardiac colonoscopy, ideally we'd want a whole heart image in less than a second. We'd want a very low dose, hopefully in the range of a screening mammogram or less. We want the cost to be quite reasonable, in fact, perhaps comparable to many lab tests, if you will. We want to be able to visualize atherosclerosis, the actual disease itself, and the plaque, and be able to differentiate the kinds of plaque, obviously, which becomes very important prognostically. Identify, of course, stenosis, and we can even do things like identify ischemia with CT, FFR, et cetera. So our requirements, so to set the stage, so now we're into 2021, we had a couple of old Siemens machines that were not suitable for cardiovascular CT. They were getting long in the tooth. And so we went on a search to find a replacement. We really wanted a top-notch cardiovascular available, cardiovascular equipped, if you will, cardiovascular capable CT machine. So we had multiple requirements. None of these are terribly surprising. It had to be fast. It had to be low dose. I'd love for it to be a volume scanner. It had to be easy for everyone, myself as well as our techs, to learn and to use, obviously. Excellent software and hardware integration, and also the ability to do exceptional cardiovascular scanning, not just cardiac CT per se, but I wanted to be able to look at any vessel from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes. So carotids, CTFROs, everything like all of those together. So in 2021, I began to kick the tires. We had all the major vendors come to our organization and do their dog and pony show. From that, we then selected the top 3 vendors. And so I went on a road trip and went to Chicago and visited a facility there and looked at their equipment. We went off to California, back to Matt Budoff's place, and looked at his equipment as well. And then lastly ended up at University of Florida and looked at their equipment. So we looked at Canon, we looked at GE, we looked at Siemens, all very impressive machines. But it was interesting, one had something I liked but didn't have this. And so it was clearly a lot of compromises. But after looking at these 3 machines, and they're kind of top-end machines at that point, I made a decision. And then I passed the word up and made a decision, wrote it up, and sent it back to the administration. So they kind of held on to it for a bit and didn't hear anything from them, okay? They control the money. I'm just the cardiovascular CT person. So interestingly, I was kind of getting a little frustrated. Let's make a decision. I want to move on. We'll put in this new machine. In April of 22, I got a phone call. So this phone call is very interesting. So I got a call from my colleague and says, we need to go down to Houston and we need to go visit United Imaging. I'm like, what's in Houston and what's United Imaging, to be honest? So within a week, we went down to Houston, we visited the showroom, if you will, and the North American headquarters and where they make the machines, and it was remarkable. So this is where I found the Atlas, the uCT Atlas, and was completely impressed. As a machine, this thing did everything I wanted. I had a large Z-axis coverage with a 640 slice Z detector, 16 centimeters whole organ, 0.25 second rotational speed, really impressive tube as well, the biggest bore at that point, and also a mechanical tilt to the gantry, particularly useful for when doing head imaging to minimize the radiation to the eyes. Very fast table speed, could hold up to 700 pounds, and all of this was just a given. This is just a single part number, and which I'll get to in a second, and also all of this was just standard. None of this was options. This was just, this is what you get when you buy the system. Isotropic detector elements, incredible range of kVs that we could use to minimize dose as well, from 60 to 140 kV. Again, 700 pounds table load capacity, and a great integration, workflow integration with AI-powered workflow as well. So very impressive. And I encourage you, anybody who's looking for a machine, you really got to go to Houston and see their showroom. There is nothing like it. It is like the Apple Store meets CT. It is a remarkable experience, and you see all of the products they have. So very, very impressed. So when I saw this, I had to give this machine a nickname. So from now on, I'll call it the Beast. Okay. So so we made the decision and set up a time to put in the machine. And what I'm going to tell you, I think, underscores just the efficiency and the flexibility of the organization. So we had an old Siemens machine. We're going to do our install in September. Come August, the Siemens machine goes down. It's completely dead. So we call up United Imaging. We say, any chance we could move the install ahead a month? And they said, no problem. So we actually installed a month early, and within a week, we had the old machine gone. We didn't have to renovate the room or anything. We didn't have to add compressors. We didn't have to add chillers. We didn't have to have a big UPS box in there, so we didn't have to add any of that stuff into the room. So in the same footprint, it was a 40 slice Siemens, we're able to fit the Atlas into that room, and so within a week, the old machine was gone, the new machine was installed, up and going. We were down 1 week, and we were up. Also, since then, I think it's remarkable, particularly for a new machine, these new machines, particularly any new machine, the most likely time it's going to break is probably early. And since it's been up since September, we've had 100% on time for the machine. We've had no downtime at all. And it's really just been an incredible tool for us for our cardiovascular scanning. Of course, all the general scanning that's done as well with that machine. So as an overview, now we'll get into the pictures. But actually, before I do that, I also want to mention when I was in Houston and looking at the machines, it was really remarkable to see that they started with a complete blank slate as far as how they sell a machine. So the usual machines, so I bought several machines in the past and been involved with those decisions in the past from different vendors. You decide upon a machine, and then there's the options of hardware, the options of software, and then all that adds up to the cost. Because United Imaging is a newer company, they rethought the whole system. So when you buy this machine, you buy a single part number. Everything's included. There's no other options you have to add. You get everything as far as the hardware and the software. And what's also remarkable, so you're not nickel and dimed. The other thing that's remarkable on the software side, we're always used to, well, yeah, this panoply of various software solutions, but this one costs this one, and this one costs this one. And then, of course, once you buy it, then you have to buy upgrades down the road. Here, a completely blank slate approach to this concept of software and software support. All the software comes with it, and you get free upgrades for the life of the system. So you just don't have to worry or budget about software upgrades or not being state-of-the-art or not having the piece of software that you really want. It's all included in the system cost, which is remarkable. There's also some neat things as far as the maintenance plans and all that, but I won't go into that. I'll get more into the technical stuff and more into the pretty pictures. So here we were able to get a machine that would do whole heart, 16 centimeter Z-axis, single beat, low dose cardiac imaging across a wide range of heart rates, and I'll show you some of the examples that we have from our particular scanner. And again, I wanted to be able to do not just cardiac, which obviously has specialized specialization as far as the temporal resolution, but also I wanted this machine to be a really phenomenal machine to be able to do any other imaging, vascular imaging as well. And as it turns out, this is the machine that delivers all those goods. So here's an example of some one-beat low-dose cardiac imaging, volumetric imaging, helical cardiovascular CTA. And all of these images were really obtained as we were just getting started. So this is, we hadn't had this very long, but we're getting really beautiful pictures. And the other thing too, when I was down in Houston at the showroom, at the end of it, they have some systems that are up and going, so you can scan phantoms and all that. And it was really incredible. So it was myself and a few other people and our head of radiology, and it was a CT tech. So they sit me down at the display station, the workstation rather, and I sit down, no training, no guidance, I'm processing. In fact, I've never actually had training on the workstation because I never needed it, which was phenomenal. It's incredibly simple to use, straightforward, but very powerful workstation as far as what I need. But behind me, I had our CT tech, or our head of radiology with lots of years of CT work in a variety of machines. He sat down at the console, and already within a few minutes, he was already scanning and effectively scanning with the AI-powered workflow that's in the console as well. Again, without any training. In fact, when the machine was finally delivered and we're up and going, all the training was done on site. We didn't have to have our techs go off and disappear for a week or two, as was typical in the past. So all that training was done on site, and it was really incredibly seamless and quick and efficient, and it was really fantastic for all of us. But here's some of the images that we can get on a regular basis. 56-year-old female, half a second acquisition, less than a millisievert. You can see just absolutely beautiful pictures here. Excellent temporal and spatial resolution as well in this woman with normal coronary arteries. So certainly rings the bell as far as those parameters, total whole heart, fast acquisition, low millisieverts as far as the acquisitions there. Here's another person, a 61-year-old asymptomatic male, but with concern about cardiovascular disease. And here, again, you can see beautiful images with a big lipid-rich plaque in the proximal LAD. And again, all low dose, very quick acquisition as well. And here's just some more images of his coronaries, so absolutely gorgeous pictures as well. In addition, we also looked at his carotid arteries. He had some concerns there, so we did a carotid artery study on him as well, and you can see just absolutely beautiful pictures. And again, on the right, you can see the workstation with the curved MPRs. Just, no additional effort. You hit the button, and the machine does the work and lays it all out beautifully. And you can see beautiful isolation of the vascular structures from the vertebra and the bone removal. So just an excellent integration of hardware and software to get beautiful pictures as well. And again, here's that male as well, who's concerned about whether he had peripheral vascular disease or not. And you can see this is a single run, so we didn't have to break up the afro, as sometimes you might have to do with other systems. And absolutely beautiful, gorgeous imaging all the way from basically the aortic arch all the way down to the feet. Incredibly high resolution, easy to do, simple. And again, all this was done and processed with the AI workflow to do all the bone removal and bench removal and all of those things as well. Here's a 49-year-old male with a heart rate of 96, was not beta blocked. And you can see, again, just absolutely beautiful quality as far as the temporal resolution as well with this particular Atlas machine. And here's another one, 47-year-old male, heart rate of 108, no beta blockers or heart rate lowering. And again, just absolutely beautiful, crisp pictures. You can see a nice illustration in the proximal LAD of a nice mixed plaque as well. And here we have some pictures of a stent. So here's a gentleman that had a stent a couple years ago, and we're concerned about his stent patency. So just to show you, again, just beautiful pictures obtained. And again, none of the patients I'm showing you today did we use beta blockers on. And again, there's some images of his carotid arteries as well. And again, completely processed with the AI workflow, no intervention on my part, and beautiful bone removal and identification of vessels on these curved MPRs. And here's some images of his legs and SFAs as well. And as I said before, I alluded before, the CT techs, they came from background of using other systems. We had Siemens, we had GE, and a variety of different systems. And they were able to get up to speed on the system very quickly. No one had to go off and get trained. All the training was done on site, and on site as we're taking pictures and taking care of patients. So, and the CT techs really love the console. They love the interface. In fact, you can see here they're scanning a person and watching TV at the same time. So it's not quite that easy, but just to give you a little bit of a facetious idea of how simple the system is to work as well. And we have the no-brainer guarantee, get a CT as well. So I have to tell you, so across my CT career, I used to do heart cath up until 2005. As I said, we began to play around with CT angio using electron beam angiography in the prior several years. When we were doing the electron beam CT, pretty much all those had cath correlation, so that's kind of how I learned the trade. By 2005, we got our first 64-slice machine. My mind was open at that point, and even with a fairly simple machine, now almost 20 years ago, I realized that the role of the cath lab in my career was done. So by 2005, my cath volume, because I used to cath before 2005, by the end of 2005, and I looked at this retrospectively, my cath volume had fallen by 84% because I switched all those patients over to cardiac CT. By 2006, my cath volume went to 0, and I have to say proudly that my cath volume since 2006 has been maintained at a steady 0 for the last nearly 20 years with CT angiography. In fact, and I'm going to be kind of harsh here for those that still cath, I think the era of the diagnostic invasive angiogram, unless you need to measure pressures, it is really over, in my humble but accurate opinion. And again, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that, and I hope no one deflates my tires out in the parking lot. But I think the era of the diagnostic angiogram is over. The way I like to think of the diagnostic angiogram is how we should be thinking, particularly if you're more my age. Some of the younger people here may not remember this or may not know of it, but I think of the diagnostic angiogram as the cardiovascular equivalent of the exploratory laparotomy, right? 20, 30 years ago, before really we had imaging, readily available ultrasound and CT, and of course MR. someone came in with an acute belly, hard to know, was it appendix, was it gallbladder, was it Campylobacter, was it whatever. So literally, I remember as a medical student reading books about how to work up and diagnose the acute abdomen, right? You had labs, you had physical exam, that's pretty much all you had. You didn't have imaging, and you couldn't make the wrong decision. You didn't want to send someone off to surgery, get a huge incision. Again, this is in the pre-lap chole and laparoscopic era. Get a huge incision. They're in the hospital for a good week, lots of rehab for no benefit. And at the same time, you can't miss a bowel obstruction, a gangrenous gallbladder, or a sick appendix. So those were trying times. And the reason that we did exploratory laparotomies is because we didn't have imaging. Well, now we have incredible, exquisite imaging. I hope you appreciate some of the images I shared with you. So I think the era, and then of course now we can add physiology to that as well, and then total whole heart plaque quantification. So it's been an amazing 20-year ride for me, but it is incredibly exciting for me to have access to this kind of a machine, this kind of equipment, this hardware, software integration. So I think that the era of the diagnostic angiogram, as I explicated, is really over, and particularly with tools such as the Atlas machine. Prognostic, we're going from diagnostic radiology, diagnostic cardiology, to prognostic cardiology has begun. It will never be easy. It certainly has been easy. There's been lots of challenges over the last 20 years. We want to aspire to innovate and climb to the top. I'll show you what this is. If you don't recognize that picture in a minute, we'll see more, we'll understand more with these tools. We'll go from simply imaging to envisioning. We should go to the very top, and here we are. This is a picture from the top of the Burj in Dubai. But with United Imaging, we don't have to do it alone. So I do want to thank everybody for your time. Thanks for joining us for lunch as well. Sorry. And I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions. So if there's any questions I can answer, firsthand questions on Atlas. And as I said, we were very excited and honored to have the first installation in the US of the Atlas CT. So the future is already here. And to quote William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not equally distributed. So it's exciting to know that we can be in the future all at the same time. And I want to thank everybody for joining us here this afternoon for lunch. I hope this was useful. And again, I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you. Also, by the way, I did put my email up there, so anybody who might be shy or timid and wants to ask a question offline, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Somebody has to be curious about something. Come on.
So where are the plants in the audience?
So maybe I'll ask you one, Dr. Osborne. Have you ever been in a situation where you were not able to scan a patient for any sort of reason? You said you don't use beta blockers?
Yeah, well, I will say the images I showed you, we didn't. I will say if you look at our mix of patients, I typically do beta block my patients because of habit, and that's what I've done. And obviously, the lower the heart rate, the best guarantee, you get the best diagnostic pictures, and also lower radiation as well. But on the other hand, we get referrals from primary care doctors, and they may not know the intricacies of cardiac CT, and they may not be thinking about beta blocking the patients. But even if they're not beta blocked, even with really quite high heart rates, we get beautiful pictures with the system.
Thank you. Anyone else? If you don't have any questions, though, we do invite you to, if you're in Texas ever, to come and visit us in Houston, or actually Dr. Osborne, because he's not that far, he's also in Texas. and hopefully you'll have a chance to experience that firsthand. Yes, we have a question.
Maybe I can ask a basic question about your introduction. If it's a new company, kind of how did it come to 140 devices and kind of such? And I mean, what's your business model, etc.?
I can answer some of this. So the history of the company is we are a young company. That is very true. Our founder is a gentleman called Dr. Xu Min, who was actually a Chinese gentleman who was educated here in the US, Case Western University, and he went back home early 2000, MD, PhD, went back home to early 2000 and decided to do something to help the Chinese patients that were clearly underserved with a lot of access to technology. And he founded the first 1.5 MR Chinese factory. So the first company that started making magnets in China was his company. After a couple of years, another manufacturer, Siemens, not to name them, approached him, and they kind of bought, I would say, half of his company, so to speak, and for about 10 years they worked together, and after 10 years Siemens bought him out. So, which became later Siemens China, actually, was the first MR, non-Chinese MR, or Siemens MR factory in China. So Dr. Xu Min had a little bit of money in his pocket from this transaction and decided to, MR was fun, but my Chinese peers need much more than this. So he decided to found United Imaging in 2011, and for the first 5 years, did nothing but R&D, development. We sold nothing for 5 years because I had money to do this. And the first system was installed and sold and installed in 2015, all domestic, all was in China. Our factories right now, because we have several, are all in Shanghai and around the country. So 2 years later, in 2017, I decided to go for a Series A, fundraising. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but new companies that look for funds to continue to grow go through those kind of events, and they usually raise around, 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars. He was able to raise $500 million, which was the largest Series A ever in the world, any industry put together. That was 2017, and then he decided to go international. So actually the US branch, so to speak, our company, was set up sometime in 2018, just before the pandemic started, which was not a good timing, but retrospectively, of course, we couldn't guess. But nevertheless, 5 years later, we went public in Shanghai market, and the company cap is now $22 billion. Just to give you an idea, as a kind of reference, the same year, GE Healthcare cap was $27 billion, except that GE has been in industry for over 100 years, and we were 10 years old. So it's by far the largest or the fastest growing medical industry equipment or company, in the world. In the domestic market today, we are number one or number two in every single modality. We now grew globally. We're present in more than 60 countries. With 12,000 employees, almost half of them are R&D. So there's a very strong push and drive for innovation, which is how we were able to, in this very short span of time, design and produce over 140 different products, even though in the US for now, we have 40 that are FDA approved. And I jokingly say sometimes, whenever we decide to launch a new product line, you just go back to the back store and you peek and it's ready to go. We just need to have FDA approval, obviously. And we have globally more than 25,000 installations. So which tells you, we have roughly 11,000 customers sites and 25,000 installations, which tells you people who buy one piece of equipment from United actually come back and buy 2 or 3. The ratio in the US is actually about 3 systems per site. So that's just a testament to the quality of what we do. We're young. We have, as Dr. Osborne hinted, a because we're young, we could kind of learn from the mistakes of the industry, if I can say it this way, and try not to repeat them. So the innovation is not only technology, it's business models and trying to solve pain points. Like everybody talks about standardization, for example. Nobody can really do it because of the way the business models are set up. If you're curious to know how we do it, just come and talk to us because we have a very different way to approach the industry. So anyway, I hope I gave you this brief history, maybe gives you an idea of who we are and where we're coming from.
Quick technical question. Is the scanner dual source, and what's the temporal resolution?
Yeah, so it's a single tube, single detector system, 16 centimeters Z-axis, with isotropic imaging of 0.5 millimeters.
And the temporal resolution is, native temporal resolution is 125 milliseconds. But as Dr. Osborne pointed out, and we like to say from a marketing standpoint, those systems were born with AI, which means we didn't try to put in their AI solutions as an afterthought, but we started from the AI and grew the system around. So we use AI technology to reach an effective temporal resolution of 25 milliseconds. And if you want to know how we do this, come see me, I'll explain to you in the book. But so native 125, effective 25 milliseconds.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? No? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Osborne, for your time this afternoon, and thank you all for coming and listening to us. Hopefully you learned something useful.